decided successfully here, 6 representative offices are now in Tokyo to compete each other.
Can you tell us what sort of capital investment would be made by the...
We cannot tell this because this is a very strong request from the prospect to be confidential nature. So when they make an announcement, when they make a decision to come to Alabama, certainly.
Thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands.
It's been one of Lieutenant Governor Bill Baxley's goals this year, getting state employees a pay raise. Earlier this week, Senate Rules Committee Chairman Charles Bishop says the Lieutenant Governor would ask that the raises be considered. Finance and Taxation Committee Chairman Hinton Mitchum says he's convinced the state's economy will grow enough to fund the $50 million cost, a contention not all agree with.
If we had some shortfalls in the budget, and we've already mandated a pay raise for state employees, and we've got one alternative, or two. One is to raise taxes, which I don't think this body's going to do, and the second is to cut back services.
That's why Dial is pushing senators to consider a simple $1,500 across-the-board pay raise. While Dial's change won't save the state that much money, it will provide a proportionally larger raise for lower-level positions. The administration is vehemently against any raise. Governor Wallace has threatened to veto the measure should it pass both chambers. And administration floor leader Senator Earl Goodwin says the prison department has already said a pay raise may force some workers to be laid off so others can get their money. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
This is a common sight in the springtime, kids on the playground. But more and more children aren't able to enjoy growing up. They're victims of child abuse. Last year, the Coffee County Pensions and Securities Department received 270 reports of child abuse and neglect. These people are more than aware of the problem. They're representatives of various agencies which could be involved in an investigation of child abuse.
By all joining together and expressing our views, we can learn from each other and teach each other something about what the other has to do and what problems they have.
In the 2 weeks since this task force was formed, members have already investigated 4 complaints, resulting in 2 arrests.
The task force has handled 3 physical child abuse complaints and 1 sexual abuse complaint.
Chairperson Josephine Jones says interviewing a child is the toughest part of investigating a child abuse complaint.
We hope that the committee with the task force will help improve the quality of the interviews with the children and streamline the investigation so the child will not be victimized over and over again by the process.
The task force hopes to receive some sort of federal funding in the future. Cal Calloway, WSFA TV News, Enterprise.
To our regional leader, who will pass it on to Alabama.
Cliff and Bill, I'm going to try to hand this to you at the same time. But from the Regional 4, and that includes everybody, the ES staff in Region 4 State. Thank you.
And it comes as no surprise to me that we have achieved the productivity leadership in the southeastern region because
bright sunny skies and brisk winds greeted tennis players from 16 teams. First round of the 33rd annual Blue-Gray Tennis Tournament. The Auburn Tigers had the luxury of facing #1 seeded Pepperdine. Out of 6 singles matches, they had 1 victory. Playing on center court, the team's top players, Marius Mazenkamp from Auburn and Carlos Delaria from Pepperdine. Mazenkamp won the match 6-4 and 7-5. Tiger coach Hugh Thompson says despite the odds, his team still has a chance.
Well, you're never happy to play the #1 seed first off, but you know we're not as strong as we were last year, so we've got to do the best we can. We feel like we have a chance in the match, maybe not a good one, but you know they can get a little careless, we can play a little better than we've shown in the past, and we'd have a chance. We've been playing well the last 2 weeks, and I feel like we've got a shot at them.
Montgomery native Kyle Anderson is playing in a higher bracket because of injuries to teammates. Anderson's match was against Danny Leal, who is ranked among the 5 best college tennis players nationwide. Leal won his match today 4-6, 6-3, and 6-4. Alabama drew Wichita State for opening day. The Tide's Mike Rainey lost his match to State's Stephen Salthouse 6-4 and 6-4. Alabama and Wichita State were tied 3-all in singles play late this afternoon.
We're in the first half. UCLA with the ball. Miguel tosses up the left-handed prayer. It goes in. He finished the night with 20 points. Louisville will come right back. Mark McSwain will go in and pop for 2. The Cardinals led by 3 at 18-15. Now here is the picture-perfect alley-oop. Billy Thompson to Mike Abram. Louisville trailed by 2, 32-20. UCLA's Reggie Miller had 16 last night. Miller here with a good fake and layup. The Bruins led 36-33 at halftime. Bruins senior center Brad Wright wound up in double figures. He had 23. Wright with this slam made it 48-39. The Cardinals tied it up late in the game. Billy Thompson tied it here at 56. But UCLA would not be denied. Reggie Miller with the stuff. The Bruins went on to defeat Louisville the final 75-66. Jack Gregory, NBC News, Los Angeles.
Before we get started, let's set the record straight. This is for real. It's not fake, right?
It's not a game on TV we be acting. This is for real.
Do you expect any bloodshed?
You know, little dude, first thing I do is gotta set you straight, man. This isn't a tag team match. This is a tag team war, brother.
There's an ominous tone to that remark. Anybody want to back out?
I'm not really concerned about it. I've never been concerned about a match.
I'll tell you, anyone accepting a challenge like this has to be admired.
Anybody who's admiring me, forget it, man. I ain't no hero.
There you have it, the principals for Sunday's Super Bout. Actor turned wrestler Mr. T and the matinee idol of the wrestling world, Hulk Hogan, against the somewhat deranged Roddy Piper and his partner, Mr. Wonderful. We have a few questions for the participants. First of all, Roddy, do you have a question for Mr. T?
Instead of wearing 29,000 20-cent chains, why don't you just buy yourself one good one? We ain't gonna stand out here, brother, and answer a bunch of stupid questions for you, man. Each other.
All right, then how about this one? Is your partner ready?
This isn't just a wrestler, brother. This is a street fighter, man. Kicking, punching, and biting.
Hey, back off, Hulk. This man has an image to uphold. After all, he has his own cartoon.
I saw him throw around 3 little green guys last Saturday.
That's it. You're getting a little bit too personal now, so we're going to wrap it up. Any final thoughts?
And I tell you the truth, I don't think the fight should take place. I think you should just go back to your cartoon series and your A-team and stick with that, man, because you're going to get yourself hurt. All right, let's get them cameras out the way. Now, this ain't no joke.
Thanks for your time, men, and may the best team win. Fred Rogan in Los Angeles for NBC News.
1983 was a banner season for White Sox slugger Ron Kittle. He was named the American League Rookie of the Year, but 1984 was a nightmare.
It's just last year everybody was injured. I was injured myself last year. I had shin splints throughout the whole season.
The shin splints helped his batting average drop from 254 to 215, and his RBI production sink from 100 to 74. But this 6'4", 220-pounder managed to belt 32 homers.
I'm a big man. You know, I got a few pounds on me, and I'm strong, so I figure I have the strength to hit many home runs as I can. I put everything I can in. I've hit them on the roof at Comiskey Park, and I think as of right now I have the record of 5 on top of the roof, and Babe Ruth only hit 1 or 2. So I think I use everything I can to get a ball out.
But Kittle says he isn't a feast or famine slugger. He says he has enough control to hit 300 on a regular basis.
As to be in the big leagues, you have to be disciplined, and you might hit a little bit better for an average or get more home runs. And I think my first 2 years have been a learning process for me. It's going to get better.
In Sarasota, Florida, I'm Tony Edwards for NBC News.
The case involves three of Tulane's best-known names. John Hot Rod Williams, the 6'10" senior center. Some called him the sun around whom the other players revolved. David Dominique, Bobby Thompson, all accused of shaving points for cocaine and cash. A 21-year-old Tulane student from New York, Gary Krantz, arrested in handcuffs late in the night, accused of dealing in cocaine. When Hot Rod himself came past the cameras, he denied any wrongdoing.
I have nothing to do with this. I got too much to stop.
You didn't take money or cocaine to shave points of basketball?
No.
And as the Tulane star was being led away, across town, Tulane coach Ned Fowler was calling this night the worst of his life, saying these are the kind of charges that could ruin an athlete's career.
Take money or cocaine for...
In closing arguments, the prosecution repeatedly called Williams a big-time dope dealer. They said he was cagey, crafty, and the only reason he was caught was that his greed overcame his better judgment. But from the outset, Williams has said he was innocent. His attorney suggested the police were out to get Williams because of previous confrontations. One lawyer called it tyranny and compared it to a court of inquisition. Much of the day's testimony centered on tape recordings, which police say they made in secret and which they claim record the sale of cocaine by Williams to a police informant. The jury listened to portions of the tapes again today. They also listened to defense lawyers once again question the validity of the tapes and the integrity of the police informant. But when defense lawyers suggested that same informant, a convicted felon, faked the tape-recorded conversations, the state's attorney called that allegation a cock-and-bull story. Late this afternoon, the jury went out to consider the facts. Moments later, one juror fell ill, and the recess was called. Williams still faces the more serious charge of trafficking in cocaine. If convicted of that, he faces a minimum $50,000 fine and 3 years in prison. No probation, no parole. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News at the Montgomery County Courthouse.
Complex. The Capitol's up on the hill. The Montgomery Ferry area building.
The symbolism of the Capitol building is representative of the state itself.
Statistics show some of these kids likely come from single-parent families and depend on child support payments, usually from their father. And only 20% of them actually get that support regularly. This commission is charged by Congress with beefing up those statistics, in part by bringing state laws into compliance with new and tougher federal laws. $2.5 million federal dollars hangs on the success of this commission's efforts. Nearly a dozen bills, some in committee and some before the House and Senate, do what Congress and the commission want. They include bills allowing the courts to intercept any income tax refund headed to a parent behind on his or her child support payments. Others require an employer to withhold the amount of the support payment from the parent's salary. Others allow certain state documents to be used to track parents down. Even though Congress is mandating these changes, Commission Chairman Leon Frazier is faced with arguments that some of these efforts are punitive.
I think he's obligated to pay it, and they should have to pay it, and I believe all of the talk about it being punitive is just another way of getting around people facing up to their obligations.
But Frazier isn't backing off and says he has the Wallace administration's backing. The other charge by Congress to the commission is to make recommendations to Governor Wallace on how the various state agencies can better integrate their efforts. That includes child custody and visitation, enforcing child support orders, and more importantly, monitoring the success of their efforts. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
I guess it's something that I would have never dreamed of happening, but I like it. And I'd like it to be even bigger, you know. I always wanted to do something. I never knew what it was. So I moved to Jackson, Mississippi, and I took a job as a telephone operator because I thought, well, this will get me time to get my 6 weeks, as a matter of fact. Temporary job, 24 years ago. I thought, boy, I really want in plant management. That's where I want to be. So it went broke. We bought it. I took my salary, very small salary, and I took the percentage of profits. I took stock. I took everything. I lived on a little or nothing.
And June's been in charge ever since. She's taken National Industries from a 15-employee company to a multi-million-dollar, 2,500-employee conglomerate. Heavy industry isn't usually where you'd expect to find a woman at the helm, but being female hasn't hindered June's success.
I just refused to let that get in my way. The old saying, to be successful in a man's world, a woman has to look like a woman, act like a man, work like a dog. Well, maybe that's true.
What's next for Montgomery's top female industrialist? A possible run for governor in 1986, and a shot at being named the nation's special trade representative. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
From a distance, this might look like a scene from the hit television series MASH. Military medical personnel sitting in their tents 1 minute, then rushing to attend wounded the next. These medical experts from Maxwell Air Force Base are not at war, but they are part of a 3-day training program to prepare them for the worst. The doctors, nurses, and x-ray technicians are from the base hospital, but in the event of a war, they could be close to the front lines, without all the modern conveniences of medical science.
If we had to go to wartime, in Europe, we'll say, this is what it would be like.
The wartime scenario includes training in tent pitching, medical decision-making, and patient evaluation. Personnel are also learning how to search a wounded enemy soldier for their own protection.
We're trying to teach them so that if it actually has to happen, they can do it without having a sense of, oh, golly, I'm not real sure I can do something like that.
This is the first group training for the Maxwell medical personnel, but the real test will be Sunday, when a simulated battle will bring wounded patients to the campsite, and personnel can see how prepared for war they actually are. At Maxwell Air Force Base, Carrie Gordon, WSFA TV News.
Second place, Billy Joe Sponge. Third place, Jackie Thompson. But just know that miracles have to come. Last call.
All right, good run.
Fast, go! That's what miracles are. Second place, Tulane Air Force. Second place, Felicia Thomas. Third place, Carolyn Bell. Wallace Thomas, Duncan, Ohio.
Left. Prepare to move. Move.
Of course, we know we're good, but you're always a little bit uncertain when you're tested for the first time with new jobs and new equipment. And we hoped we did well, and we expected to do well, but you never know until the real thing.
In 1983, the Alabama legislature made Dexter Avenue part of the Capitol complex. Now, because of this, several organizations trying to restore downtown insist the state has an obligation to help them.
Recently, some of us have met with the governor to remind him of these facts and to ask his help concerning the leasing of some structures on Dexter Avenue, beginning with the Montgomery Fair building.
Last year, the Department of Pensions and Security signed a lease to rent the Montgomery Fair building. But last fall, that building caught fire and DPS broke the lease. Now they say they plan to move into a new state office building, a building that's not in downtown Montgomery. That move upsets those trying to revitalize this historic district. They say they don't want to interfere with the construction of the new building, but they don't want to be forgotten either.
We know that this is not going to be adequate to take care of all of the state's needs. The next step, of course, is to develop downtown.
And while Narrow says there's still the possibility of the state agency moving into the Montgomery Fair building, both DPS officials and Wallace aide Elvin Stanton say there's no way. Terry Stanton, WSFA TV News.
The governor of Alabama, and I'm not pointing out Governor Wallace because I like Governor Wallace. I think he's doing what he thinks the people wants him to do. But we can stop that right now. We don't have to go looking for him. You know, the U.S. representatives, our Congress can do anything they want to. They can restrict it. They can say no. And I don't worry about them on in shopping centers and stuff like that. I worry about them on farms, oil wells, and manufacturing companies. You know, I worry about that. I don't think Japan would let. I think Japan has got such a hold in this country that they wouldn't allow our government to appoint me especially. But boy, would I love to get in there and do some negotiating with them.
But we feel like that it will give us a better opportunity to get the ball to our tight ends, our wide receivers, a running back, and a quarterback, and have a little more versatile offense than maybe what we've had, and get the ball that's more of a predetermined offense than what we've had. So, you know, we'll just have to wait and see. We think some of the things that we're going to be experimenting with will present some problems for defenses adjusting and that sort of thing.
I think it gives us a good opportunity. A lot of running backs around because you get a lot of rest, you know. Back and go full speed out of formation and come out here. I got a lot of backs to rest them up. So I just believe it's opportunities.
Well, I feel pretty good about it. I think that I will open up our offense more. We'll be able to pass from more than one different formation, and it should open our running game up a whole lot more. So I'm looking forward to it myself.
it's one of those years where we don't have a real weakness, but we feel like we've got to come some distance in every phase of the game. We've got to get better in the offensive line, at quarterback, running back. I think the problem we have, or we're going to try to solve, are team concept kind of things, and not necessarily in a certain unit.
They said it's going to be fun, but a lot of hard work. They said that it's going to be like the spring of '81 when we, before I got here, and they said it was real hard. They said they're going to go back to the basics and learning stuff.
In spring training, we're going to try to find out who the men are. I think that find some leadership this spring, work real hard, and see who wants to play.
Come on in.
I made it great.
Right now, we're at a standstill. We're just dragging some and checking the bank. There's not much more we can do.
$75 all in. Thank you. Now 600. $600 six now. 6,550. $550 on the 550. 7 1/4. 7 1/4.
With the sound of the auctioneer's voice and a raise of a hand, you could buy your own personal school bus today. The Montgomery County school system is selling the used buses at its first open auction. No, most of these people aren't sentimental about the old, well-traveled vehicles. It's what's inside these yellow Roadrunners that counts. There was no limit as to how many buses you could buy, and that's a good thing for James Kahn, who walked away with 26 school buses.
I really do. I really think I got a good ride this morning. They brought I think, a fair price, but I was glad to buy them at the price I got them at.
But just what does one do with 26 school buses?
Well, we're going to sell parts off them, and we renovate some and sell them to churches and different organizations that has a use for them.
Officials say all money from the sales will go to the school system's general fund. No one is quite sure yet how much money the auction will raise, but with more than 50 vehicles selling anywhere from $300 to $1,600 apiece, we're talking about some cash. And if auto parts aren't what you're looking for, the school system just happens to have a few other items up for sale. Just like most of us, school systems tend to collect things. And when the things stack up, it's time for a sale.
This is our first experience with an auction of this sort. We have sold obsolete used equipment through sealed bids, and due to the vast array of items that we have here today, this was the best way to do it.
And what a selection. Copiers, chairs, and clocks, just to name a few. Practically anything you would find in a school and more. So for those of us who clean out our closets by having garage sales, we might learn a lesson from the school system. From the looks of today's sale, auctions work. Anything going to be left over, do you think?
No, we're going to clean it out. Going to sell it all.
Carrie Gordon, WSFA TV News.
To do with the money this year?
This year we plan on paving a playground area because one of the class areas they can't use anymore, and if there's any money left over, we're going to use for computers.
So how much?
On the top 15 people. Okay, so this is everybody who competed.
Oh, I know what it was. Wait. 29. Try this 29.
Well, this year is a very important spring for us because it's our second year out, and I'd say that our first observation is that we feel that we're 1,000% ahead of where we were a year ago. Our kids have had a year to learn our system. They've had a very good off-season program. They've had a chance to learn our offense, learn our defense, learn our coaches. We've had a chance to get to know a little bit more about them, and so we feel real good about where we are right now. We ended our season on a very good note, and we have carried that theme throughout the off-season and into this year.
Watch him, son.
Get your hands up! Push him!
Oh, Will.
Get on it! Hold him out! Hold him out!
We start with first half action. Memphis State in white. Little Andre Turner alley-oops to William Bedford for the slam. Bedford finished with 8 points on the day, but Villanova came right back. Harold Presley with the jump pass inside here to Ed Pinckney. He dunks over Bedford for the basket and the foul. Keith Lee would contribute only 10 points in this game for Memphis State. In fact, he fouled out midway through the second half, here hitting on the layup inside. Game was tied 23-all at halftime. Villanova coach Raleigh Massimino said, hey, we've come too far. Let's get ahead. And they did in the second half. This is Ed Pinckney missing on the layup, but he doesn't give up as Villanova has it all season long. Pinckney wins the fight for the ball and comes up with a reverse slam dunk over Keith Lee. Then it was showtime for Villanova. Dwayne McClain to Harold Presley. Presley goes by 2 defenders and scores with a pretty reverse layup there. Then, late in the game, Villanova worked the spread offense here. Dwayne McClain goes by Baskerville Holmes for the dunk. McClain led the Wildcats with 19 points as Villanova defeats Memphis State 52-45. Villanova coach Raleigh Massimino heading for a lifetime dream. He'll play for the national championship on Monday night.
It's early morning, and about 60 farmers from the Montgomery area are boarding a plane at Danley Field. These farmers will join more than 200 other state food producers in the nation's capital for 3 days of meetings with members of Congress. Each year, the Alabama Farm Bureau organizes a Washington visit, but farm leaders say this year the trip is crucial.
It's going to be a real challenge for us this year to survive, and of course we're going to just plead with them that our food supply that could be endangered as a result of some of the foreclosures of land and people not going to be able to farm this year. I think it's more real than it's ever been.
The farming industry is keeping a close eye on Washington right now as Congress is putting together federal farm aid programs which will affect agriculture for the next 5 years. And farmers are looking to Washington for answers. With more and more farmers heavily in debt and going under, state farm leaders say it's time to take the farm crisis seriously.
We've said that it may take a food shortage to really ever get the full attention of government instead of them playing politics with agriculture.
Yet as many state farmers live day by day, the Reagan administration is looking down the road. In early March, President Reagan vetoed a farm debt relief bill designed to give farmers some quick cash for spring planting. Though some farmers agree the bill was only a Band-Aid solution, the veto follows the Reagan administration's plan, which is to wean farmers off federal programs and price supports. But Myrick says if that is to be the future of farming, he just hopes it will happen slowly.
I guess we're going to just be pleading for a transition period to give us a little more time that we might get our feet back under us to get able to produce for our market-oriented agriculture as opposed to a governmental, regulated, regimentated agriculture.
Although the farmers are unsure of what they will accomplish in Washington, this trip is an important one. Because when new federal farm policy is created later this year, these Alabama farmers want to know their voices have been heard. At Danley Field, Carrie Gordon, WSFA TV News.
"115 Maxwell Air Force Base medical personnel participated in today's medical red flag exercise, from colonel physician to no-stripe lab technicians.
You have to act a lot faster because you're prepared for everything in the hospital. You got all the right equipment, but here you got to work with what you got.
Everybody ready? Yeah. Ready. 1, 3. 1, 2, 3.
To many of these men and women, this exercise was as close to actual warfare as they have come. But these same medics could conceivably be ordered to respond to an airfield attack in Germany later this year, and they must be ready.
Keep it up.
Upon arriving at the battle scene, the medics prioritize the victims. That means the servicemen with the most serious injuries are tended to first, and so
Right
on.
next to him.
Dead soldiers are tagged and left behind for the mortuary service. The wounded soldiers are taken to a battalion where they are cared for according to injury. A special decon unit takes care of soldiers suffering from chemical warfare injuries. Others are routed to the proper physicians. In a real-life situation, soldiers with serious wounds would be transported to a military hospital. Those with minor injuries would be patched up and sent back to the front. We asked the major in charge of Medical Red Flag what these medics were being prepared for.
We don't have a commitment right now to Central America or in the Pacific area.
That could change, obviously, but right now we are tasked, if we had to go, as of October, to go to Europe.
Lisa Walsh, WSFA TV News.
We got the directive last year.
Well, the relatives called our office and said that he was missing from this spot, and the deputies that came down and investigated it found some footprints leading into the water, none coming out, and the subject hadn't shown up back at home since then.
Tar Heel Greg Parker tied with Miami's Woody Austin for the best overall score in the three-day event. Their total stroke number was 212. That led North Carolina to victory in a tourney where the Tar Heels never trailed. The second best overall score was teammate Brian Sullivan. He finished with a 73, one over with a three-day total of 214. Second place went to the Cowboys of Oklahoma State. One of the best shots today came from Scott Verplank. His approach here on 18. Verplank carded an even par round of 72. LSU golfers managed third place. Bingle Bob Friend completed his round today with an even par putt on 18 to finish at 5 over.
Florence Carter is one of more than 400 area residents who will miss the FSC program. She lost her job about 8 months ago, and now without that federal check, the 61-year-old telephone secretary isn't sure what to do.
Well, I just hope and pray, and I've got 2 children that I can, they'll help me if I get in a real big tie.
Ranked 4th nationwide in unemployment, the demise of the program hits Alabama hard.
Of course, you know, Alabama's one of the so-called smokestack states, and those are the people that have been hardest hit.
Joining the steel workers in the ranks of the long-term unemployed are construction workers and textile workers. President Reagan is reportedly against any congressional plans to salvage the program, and that leaves a lot of problems for the unemployed.
Well, they're just going to have to find work, or the only other solution that I know of is welfare.
No, I don't think so. I think I can live without it.
Terry Stanton, WSFA TV News.
Statement in.
Officer Island was a police corporal in October of 1983 when he posted the poem 3 days before the city elections, in which incumbent Mayor Emery Falmer was pitted against challenger Franklin James. The 8-sentence poem wasn't favorable toward the mayor. In it, he was referred to as Emery Amin, and the last line was an obvious political jab, referring to the upcoming election. It said, quote, "So down with the dictatorship and down with Emery. And like the slogan says, let's make him a memory." Island's attorney says that poem was posted in the police department for only an hour before it was torn down. Island suit claims he was demoted from corporal to patrol officer because of the poem. The city personnel board upheld Island's reassignment, basing their decision on the belief the officer violated regulations requiring him to respect his superiors. Federal Judge Myron Thompson will hear opening arguments in the case tomorrow morning at 9. Lisa Walsh, WSFA TV News.
The 42-year-old pharmacist was taken into custody at the drugstore by Vice officers and taken to the Montgomery City Jail. Vice Unit Lieutenant Dennis Bodine says Stevens is also facing 4 other drug-related charges from an arrest several weeks ago. And according to Lieutenant Bodine, Stevens allegedly continued to sell illegal drugs even though he knew of a pending grand jury investigation into his case. Police say Stevens now faces a total of 7 counts of illegal drug sales, and they say the State Pharmacy Board is also looking into possible violations of state drug laws. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
So we have kept in pretty close contact with Willie, and he's done a tremendous job for you. He's just looked at the figures a year ago, and
It means that the taxpayers of the city of Dothan in the future could save literally millions of dollars in interest cost, because an upgrade in your bond rating decreases the interest rate on those bonds.
150 to 200,000, but because I couldn't position now, let me just say that basically that boils down to all of the after you made transfers. You know, the more money was transferred out of the system than the
It's likely to be several years before any construction begins, even if continuation of the project is approved. Alabama supporters are lobbying for funds to keep the project alive and to keep the waterway navigable. The state is committing $15 million to the project, pending legislative approval, and that pledge will make it easier to ask for federal money. What may not be so easy is promoting the preliminary stages of the project, which show its cost-to-benefit ratio does not meet minimum standards, unlike the recently opened Tennessee Tongue-Bigby waterway, which so far is proving to be a good investment. Reports indicate during the first 7 weeks, about 150,000 tons of freight sailed up the Tenn-Tom. Still, state officials say the Coosa, Alabama navigation project could in the long run be an economic boost for industry and would make Alabama more competitive internationally.
I don't know what the dollar figure is, but you have an awful lot of wood products south of here that's transported on the river. There's some steel from Montgomery transported on the river. And I believe a chemical company, a fertilizer company out of Mississippi who transport up from the Gulf up to this port.
So we're possibly talking about millions of dollars.
Millions of dollars, oh yes, of course.
A decision on funding to keep the Coosa River Navigation Project alive won't be made until after the Easter break. In the meantime, Congressman Bevel is optimistic that some money will be appropriated, though probably not this year or within the next couple of years. The big obstacle Bevel and his congressional colleagues face is the $200 billion federal deficit and the impact it's having on all appropriations this year. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News on the Coosa River.
Farmers hoping for a sympathetic year in Washington may be out of luck. Senate Majority Leader Bob Dole says agriculture will have to take its lumps like all other programs in the fight to reduce the skyrocketing federal deficit.
And it just seems to me, from the standpoint of the American farmer, whether he lives in Alabama or Kansas or California or wherever he may live, that the biggest threat to agriculture, in my view, is the growing deficits, the strong dollar, the lack of exports. And I've just been visiting upstairs about another real problem
in many areas, and that's just all this new production overseas and the fact that we're not competitive.
These budget deficits are going to have to be addressed. And maybe we didn't like to hear what he said, but I think he said to us that agriculture was not going to be left out of these budget cuts.
The farmers are hoping Congress will give them some relief. With spring planting underway, a shot of cash is sorely needed, but unlikely, especially since the so-called Band-Aid solution farm debt relief bill has been vetoed. Alabama's delegation has 2 more days to make inroads into congressional thinking before returning home. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
Let's introduce the athletes for the 1985 International Winter Special Olympics.
With that command and the music of the Brigham Young University Band, the 1985 Winter Special Olympic Games were officially underway in Park City, Utah. In they marched, 800 Special Olympians from 15 foreign countries and every state in the Union. They were there from the Far East, from South America, from Europe, even the Iron Curtain countries. Special Olympics is now worldwide, transcending political ideology.
Warm chance, good say ya, be a good luck to all the Olympians, Special Olympians.
Following Mrs. Shriver's welcome, the Special Olympians cited the traditional Olympic oath. Let me win, but if I cannot win, let me be brave in the attempt. And 48-year-old Special Olympian Shirley Carlos, a cross-country skier from Ogden, Utah, lit the Olympic flame as Billy Kidd stood by. Winter sports are not popular in the warm weather states such as Alabama, but we were well represented. Our 6 young Alabama Olympians captured a gold, 3 silvers, and a bronze medal. And more importantly, at the time of their lives. We'll tell you about that next time.
We can't for you. In the billing of the show, Leroy Van Dyke from Nashville, we are going to have a benefit fundraising concert, you might say, or you might call it a song fest, because we've got so many different types of talents that's already invited themselves and wants to participate to raise money for Vicki.
Everybody who's had a part in this, there's no words that our family can express of how much we appreciate it. We are humbled, and we are very, very appreciative of this. Never forget it.
The Friendship Force is an international organization created for the purpose of creating friendships between peoples of all countries, with the idea that if we were all friends, then there could not be the possibility of a war.
Early in the game, Villanova in blue would take it inside. Dwight Wilbur with a beautiful pass to Dwayne McClain. Villanova had the early lead. Later, the Wildcats tried inside again. Patrick Ewing puts on the pressure. Bill Martin comes down with the rebound. To Michael Jackson on the break. A beautiful pass coming up here by Jackson to David Wingate for the beautiful reverse. Then Michael Jackson and Patrick Ewing went to work. The alley-oop. Ewing sends it down. He would go on to score 3 straight baskets from Jackson's feeds. This one picture perfect. Ewing once again leaping high and sending it in. But Villanova was hanging tough. The Wildcats went for the last shot of the half. Presley takes the shot. He misses, but there to put it back up and in, Villanova led 29-28 at halftime after the miss by Wingate. As the clock ran down, Reggie Williams takes a shot at Chuck Everson. Tempers were flaring. Then in the second half, watch Ed Pinckney against Patrick Ewing. You don't know how he scored this one, but Pinckney would convert for a three-point play, and the picture of Pat Ewing's face would tell the story. Later, the Wildcats get it to Dwayne McClain. He sees an opening, and there's no stopping him. Villanova led by 5, 41-36. Back comes Georgetown. Michael Jackson to David Wingate. Driving the baseline, Georgetown had the lead back. Here was the key shot of the game. Villanova down by 1, working patiently for the open shot. Harold Jensen found it and canned it. Villanova led 55-54, Raleigh Massimino smelling the upset. Then Harold Jensen would come up with one more steal for Villanova. The Wildcats complete the Cinderella story with an amazing 66-64 upset over Georgetown. This is Scott Clark reporting for NBC News.
The arrest came after the Revenue Department served notice on 136 individual and corporate taxpayers in 3 counties that a past due liability existed. 113 paid the taxes.
We've been able to complete 23 arrests. We've gone to trial in 18 of these cases. And of those 18, we've gotten 18 convictions with average fines of $1,000 and 90 days jail sentence. Now, the result of this, in terms of dollars, is that we've been able to collect some $193,000 just on these cases alone.
Commissioner White says the sweep continues in Tuscaloosa and 3 other counties where at least 45 more arrests are expected. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
In federal judge Myron Thompson's courtroom today, Officer Island testified the poem was written with political humor and is not critical of the mayor, but of the promotion process in the police department. For that reason, Island says he's protected by the First Amendment.
And you can't have a police department where lower-ranking officers are calling their superior officers rats, mice, dullards, and two-faced. Certainly that's not the intent of the Constitution.
Island, who at the advice of his attorney would not appear on camera, said during testimony that promotions seemed to be based on political ties to the mayor. He was demoted to patrolman at a lower salary after the poem appeared in the police department. Fulmer says Island wasn't demoted, he was transferred. So are you saying that the poem had nothing to do with the fact that he was transferred with a decrease in...
Oh, yes, it did. It had a lot to do with his being transferred, but I merely made the point that he was transferred, not demoted, because he never had a rank that he had a proprietary right to.
If Judge Thompson rules that the poem is constitutionally protected, then the second question to be answered is how much in damages will Officer Island receive? That question will be answered by a 7-member jury. Terry Stanton, WSFA TV News.